Hello and welcome to Studio 275. Beautiful morning today. Um, this is part of this one is part of a two-part series on looking at ways of promoting your music if you're a composer. Firstly, this week through the traditional route of a publisher, and then next week about 20 or 30 tips, I guess, on how you can do it as a self-publisher. And then I'm intending to do a live broadcast with somebody who else who self-publishes in early in the autumn to get their views, as every composer will have different methods. I'm not particularly tech savvy, and yet I know that some composers are much more tech savvy than me and have a vast range of ways of promoting their own music. It is a thorny subject because, of course, most composers hate promoting their own music, and yet, of course, if we write music at all, and it doesn't really matter whether we're talking about selling it here or we're giving it away. The fact is that we presumably want people to hear what we've written, although sometimes I hear people performing things that I wrote a long time ago and think maybe I shouldn't have let that one go out to the public. And I think it's quite funny that sometimes the piece of music that you spend hours and hours and hours over, which you reckon to be a really fine piece of music, turns out to be the one that nobody's interested in at all, and maybe a little snippet that you wrote over a cup of coffee one morning. I think the Prayer of Saint Teresa, one of my little choral pieces, and the Ave Verum, another little choral piece, which just came really over a morning's cup of coffee. And there's nothing wrong with them. Both of them are really nice pieces, but they are the pieces that have gone on to sell lots and lots and lots of copies. So first of all, thank you for everybody who watched last week and commented last week. And let's get into the subject of promoting your music through a traditional publisher. The traditional publishing route is one where you assign your music to a publisher who may or may not take the copyright. We don't take the copyright from any of our composers. We merely operate a license to print and distribute contract, which will have a fixed time on it. And during that time, we expect that composers will work with us and not promote their music through um, other means of selling it. The traditional publisher route, some people would argue, is old-fashioned and also doesn't give enough back to the composer in terms of royalties. So I thought I might just say some of the things that that a publisher does on your behalf. First of all, they will, or we still anyway, print the music as well as offering it as downloads. And the reason for this is that we want to get it into the retail shop network. And we can't do that, obviously, with downloads. That if we do put it into the retail shop network, and Presto Music in England is certainly somebody who we sell a lot of music through, then the music needs to be barcoded because it won't go on their system. I should just probably say that everything I'm saying here relates to the UK and not necessarily to other countries. Um, so we buy barcodes and the music is barcoded, meaning it goes on the computerized system of all the retailers. We also we do download copies as well, because to be fair, to send one piece of music from here to America, and we have lots and lots of customers in America, it is going to cost more in postage than it is in the actual piece of music in the first place. So we offer downloads as well. But a lot of people like a printed hard copy, so we tend to do short runs which we can repeat when we need. Publisher has legal responsibilities in this country also to deposit your music or any publication in the SIX lending library, the British Library at Thorpe Arch, just up the road from here, and other libraries as well. I find it sometimes quite amusing that if we forget to do that, they chase us up saying, "Where is the music?" And then when we send the music, they say, "Thank you for the music. We've got such a backlog, it won't be listed for 2 years anyway." But it is a responsibility in this country. And actually, I'm not quite sure why the responsibility now lies if the music is download only, because it has actually been published, and therefore if somebody was to walk into a library and ask for it, the whole purpose of the system is that whilst there may not be a copy in that library, there will be one that the library can ask from the British Lending Library or the other libraries, legal deposit libraries. And the publisher will also distribute copies to the trade, because we want our pieces of music to be reviewed. And thankfully, we have a very good relationship with the music magazines, and all of them will generally review, I don't know, 6 or 7 pieces of ours each year, which all assists in the promotion of that music. We also send them to likely performers or choirs or who we think may record them, all assisting in the promotion of that music, or we may send them to a lot of organ music goes to a very fine collection of organists that we have contacts with, who record the music for us, for whom we are incredibly grateful. I have to say that one of the problems that we encounter a lot is composers not wanting to get involved with their own music. Way back in the 1990s, I organised the Yorkshire Composers Festival, and I did this for a few years, and what we actually did was provided the performers, the venues, for composers to have, Yorkshire composers, to have their music heard. So all the composer really had to do was send us the music, no cost involved, it was all grant funded, and maybe come along to the rehearsals and assist the performers in telling them about the music, and maybe taking the rehearsals of the music. Unfortunately, after about 5 years, I had to stop because a lot of the composers never appeared, didn't actually want to get involved. They actually, I think, and somebody once said this to me, a lot of composers just like to see their music in print, but that's as far as it goes. Well, so we stopped because, as I said, it was difficult getting the composers to attend either the performances or even any of the rehearsals. The relationship with a traditional publisher needs to be set out at the beginning as a long-standing one, because it is quite a lot of work to get a new composer onto the marketplace, and that's especially if the composer is writing sacred choral music, because as the amount of church choirs diminish, at exactly the same time the amount of composers writing sacred music increases. And we tend to not accept any, we're fairly blunt with our composers, so we don't accept sacred choral music unless it fits into our accessible choral library series, which is for choirs up to 3 parts. And I remember Adrian Self, who runs Animus Publishing in the UK, telling me probably about 15 years ago that he wasn't accepting any more sacred choral music because he just couldn't sell it. I think one of the important things, and I've got 5 tips here, so we're back to week 1, is that if you're sending music to a publisher, make sure that the publisher actually publishes that sort of music. So as a publishing house here, we do organ music, choral music, a small amount of instrumental music, but we don't, for instance, do music for accordion, 2 marimbas and a kazoo. So it wouldn't be much point in sending us your latest grand opus, Symphony number 19, for kazoo and orchestra, because it's not going to get anywhere with us. So finding the publisher's catalogue, visiting the publisher's website will tell you the sort of music that they produce. We recommend that you don't send it to more than one publisher at the same time, because should one say yes, then you've got to go to the others and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've got to withdraw this now because a publisher has said yes." We like to see a representative sample of your works, 2 or 3 pieces, because one piece may be an absolute masterpiece. I'm thinking now of the English composer from the 18th century, Maurice Greene. And if you are involved in church music, there is an anthem by Maurice Greene, Lord Let Me Know Mine End, which is an undoubted masterpiece of a piece of music. But if you are an organist, you may play Maurice Greene's organ voluntaries, which really don't come up anywhere near to the quality of that anthem. And it is that sometimes composers write an absolutely amazing piece, but the follow-up pieces are not in the same league. So sending a few representative pieces helps us look at whether that composer, and not just us, other publishers I would guess, has something to say. We prefer composers that actively play the instrument or are singers, so that the music that they produce is clearly, they understand it because they understand the instrument, its difficulties, its strengths. And similarly, we value composers who conduct choirs if they're sending us choral music, because they will know the principles of vocal writing, and they will have connections with not just their choir but other choirs who are people that we can market the music to. A lot of established musicians, for instance, provide recordings which we can use to promote scores. And it's certainly much easier to actively market a composer who is involved in the music community because they have a network. Simply sending us a score and hoping for success and then not engaging with us is actually never enough. And actually, this is even more important in an age of self-publishing, that the composer engages proactively all the time. All our successful composers, I would say, maintain websites, and they actively help promote their music via social media and more, which then backs up the work that we're doing. I was going to put this into tips, wasn't I? Sorry, so tip 1 would be make sure that the music is actually in that composer's catalogue. Tip 2 would be not to send to more than one publisher at the same time. Tip 3 would be to send a representative sample. I don't mean a wheelbarrow load. I mean 3 or 4 pieces probably at the most. Tip 4 would be to make sure that you're sending us music that is going to work because you play that instrument, or you are a singer if you're sending us choral music. And tip 5, a recording, and it doesn't have to be the world's finest recording, is useful in letting us hear that people are actually using your music and it works. So where am I going from here? A successful submission will be one from a composer who understands the types of choirs and organists who would benefit from the music that you're sending in, taking time to tailor the piece maybe to different skill levels, to back that up with a website of your own, which we will go into in much greater detail in part 2 of this. And 3, that a composer has built a network with whom they can engage. We often like to promote a certain composer's music through a sing day, and the composer may be invited, or through a trade fair, and the composer may be invited. It is a long-term, two-way relationship, the composer-stroke-publisher relationship, whereas the self-publishing composer may be a more isolated relationship in terms of meeting other people, but maybe a much more proactive and visible relationship in doing things online. I think that I'm going to wind this up now because it's getting to the 15 minutes, and I did say to Anne, who works here, that we would never go past 10 minutes, but now since we're on 14 minutes, I'm going to wind it up. Next week we'll look at publishing from a completely different point of view, where all the things that I've mentioned here that the publisher will do on your behalf, you would need to do. And you would therefore also need to be successful, a much wider range of skills, mainly internet based these days, it has to be said, to get your music out there. But it can be done. Of course, it can be done. There are some incredibly successful composers who do everything themselves. I hope there's a snippet of information in here that might be some use to you. You can always ask questions in the comments and we will answer them in the next video. Please subscribe, please share if you think it's useful, and we will see you again next week for part 2 of promoting your own music.